I would have to have a very strong relationship, and it would have to like come about naturally. Like the idea of marriage would have to like be something almost like as if we invented it ourselves. Like how
Mm,
would we how would we go about this concept, and
mm,
how would we want to express ourselves in this relationship moving forward in a new light? Because as you switch titles in which you give your last name to each other, or the man gives the last name to the woman, you
right.
know basically you are symbolizing that you are now part of the same family tree, and family has a certain closer bond than friends do, in a way in which you are now claiming that this person that did not share your same blood now is part of the same bloodline, in
Mm.
a way.
Wow, that's a
So,
very powerful way of describing it. Yes.
yo, what's good? Good morning. The ground is ice cold, so we're gonna do this as fast as possible and then get back in the van. We're doing 25 push-ups to warm up the body before we get into the video. What's up, guys? Another week. Welcome to the show. So today we're going to be talking about marriage, the foundations of marriage, and through time, the changes that have occurred until this modern day. And we're going to give some reference examples here and there so that you guys could understand it better. And yeah, let's get it right into it. So Jin, where do we start?
So hey guys, I recently got married. It's been 2 years now, and my baby is about almost 1 years old. And so this topic is holding dear to me, and I think it's fun and interesting to explore how marriage has evolved over the years, and it's not always how you know television has told us that it's always about love, it's always about romantic, and I think for the most people that are very practical will understand that marriage is not always romantic and sweet to the heart. So, where do we go from here, Eric?
I think I think we should start with the history of marriage and where it first originated so that we can get a good foundation of the concept.
So, I think the cool concept is, why do we think marriage is sacred? Or why is marriage something that a lot of people like, a lot of people don't like?
Well, marriage has been something that has been historically religious, and essentially the religions of Christianity and Catholicism has influenced the Western aspect of marriage to a large degree. And basically the original confounds of marriage was between a man and a woman, but nowadays it's shifted to so many more aspects that we haven't necessarily been able to explore yet as individuals. So that's what we want to get into.
Like LGBT and stuff like that that you're talking about, that it's expanded, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. And just to backtrack, like you said, a little bit about the origin of marriage. So now we're in year 2024, and if we look back a few thousand years where life and looks very different, marriage was never about romantic love. A lot of times it has to do with survival, political ties, strategic resources allocations, protection, and transfer of power, transfer of resources, inheriting resources. And that's what marriage was for the most part about. Also, when two families come together, if they are strong in themselves, they bond together to create bigger alliances to basically survive in the political or whatever landscape they were in. You can see that in Egypt. You can see that in Rome. You can see that in China. You know, during the Egypt times, royal family would always marry each other to keep the blood pure, because the royal family was supposed to be descendants of God or part of God themselves. And while in China, marriage is about political alliances. That's why during the Three Kingdoms, there's a lot of last names being thrown around. It's always about, whichever family is reigning the territory. So in that sense, family is the controlling power. And you can still see that in the chubbies in Korea right now, even though Samsung and Hynix and all those companies are, very modernized and are capital companies like in the capital world, but they are still controlled by these powerful families. And a lot of politics in Korea is actually controlled by these families as well. So the same way these royal families like the Waltons, the Rothschilds are still in the hidden power, a lot of times marriage has evolved for everyday people like you and I, because we don't have these super, super strong family powers. We are more like just family to have fun. And I'm sure there's medium and large size families that are growing as well. Like the Trump family is a new money growing in their power as well.
Yeah, so in the modern day, we've definitely shifted from a society that values the family for business practices and for political reasons to a more culturally diverse kind of expression where we're very much influenced by the media that we consume. So like all the Disney movies that we've watched have been like about princes and princesses getting married to become kings and queens, and where love is the main component that is preached in order to, I guess, to appeal to our senses in a way that is different from how it's traditionally been, right? And how we've basically been educated into a marriage society where love is the foundation. So when you think of marriage nowadays, it's a lot different from how they used to think about marriage back in the days, basically, right?
Yes. I think marriage back then, it was a lot more about responsibility and survival, as there wasn't much room for love. I think the romanticizing of love is only really started in the 1800s, and that is when the Enlightenment era happened with all the tea parties, the ballroom dances, and the royal family stories. And with the Enlightenment, there was more poetry, there was more writings available, so therefore the transfer of these concepts were more widespread, and it kind of caught on since then with the romanticism. And I think it's definitely propagated more and more with the development of cinematographics and Hollywood. It's almost like the key concept, because perhaps it resonates so deeply into our psyches. Love, affection, validation, care, all these things that are very integral to our well-being as a psyche, right?
I like to think about the concept of marriage being like that last kind of level where you are maxing out your character and your relationship, the skill of the relationship level, and you are taking it to the highest kind of echelon in which you are giving it a structure that says, hey, this is what we are now. This is a title of marriage, and then there's a structure behind it in which you are honoring each other in certain ways that you don't necessarily do when you're out of a marriage. So there's certain aspects of like, this is how we carry ourselves when we are a Mr. and Mrs., and that we share as the same last name, we're going to carry ourselves on a different level now because we are becoming one with each other as opposed to being two separate entities, right? I think marriage is a unity in which you are becoming a single unit in which you guys are operating together. Your thoughts, they go together, and your, like, all the little discussions that you guys have with each other, you guys have to come to a certain conclusion. And you know, you might not necessarily agree with each other, but you're at least going to think it out to the point where you can find a place of reconciliation in which you guys aren't necessarily arguing anymore about it. You know, this is where you want to come to in a marriage, so that there's nothing left on the table, that you guys have everything basically fleshed out to the point where you're not necessarily thinking about stuff all the time. You know, there's going to be a certain level of upkeep in the marriage, but you want to get those things out of the way so that you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, I think what you said is actually very true and very interesting. Like you said, it's the next level in a relationship, and almost like the final level, and where two individuals, 1 + 1, come together and we multiply, right? It's the fundamental transfer of human consciousness, where right now, like you said, you try to make it work one-on-one. A lot of times 1 + 1 = 2, right? But in a marriage, the ideal case is 1 + 1 = 3, maybe 1 + 1 = 4, maybe 1 + 1 = 5. So the productivity and outcome also multiplies. And the worst case is when you have 1 + 1 = 1.5, or you know, where two people coming together is actually creating less abundance and more conflict and turmoil. And that's where, you know, when you have start dwindling, spiral down of failing marriages. And a lot of cases, like what you said, where two individuals can come together and communicate well, solve problems together, work through things, and there's a lot of little challenges that comes with a family, comes marriage. Especially, you want it to be successful, you want it to go well, not only for the marriage itself, but for yourself, right? We're individuals that live in those realities. If we choose to be married, we choose the person that we spend, you know, more than 13, 14, 17 hours of our day in, that with, we want that person to be pleasant. That way we have a good life, as well as individuals. And that takes a lot of work. And I think in the scheme and perception of a optimal best man, as in you want to be your best self and I want to be my best self, actually becoming married and becoming a father comes with so much more responsibility, compared to being a single man, where I can go out and party whenever I want. I have more than enough money to do what I want. I can just go and do it without thinking, because I have no tiebacks. Now, with more of these responsibility, I think a lot more about my safety, about my well-being. How will I do if I do well? How will I do if I do not well? It's all going to affect the family. So it makes you, as a man, become more considerate. I think if I want to have a successful, I become a lot more of a grounding force. I become a lot more of a positivity and resources provider, and a stabilizer, if you will, to my environment. And all that shape-shifting and transformation, I think it can occur in any stages, but in the essence of a marriage, where you actively choose it, or it's a responsibility that you choose to shoulder on, it helps you transform to that next level as a man, I think.
Yeah, definitely. It's a structuralization building block where you go to the next level from just personal responsibility to group responsibility. And just like you said, from adding together two people, you can get higher quantities of output than just solo, right? You can get, fivefold of the effort into product, and basically, like, symbolically, 1+1 = 3, or 1+1 even equals 1 to a certain extent, because where you're thinking of providing a certain level of quality to a relationship, basically, like, put it in an output that is congruent to one idea or one engine of expression. And, like, you can take this unit of plurality and singleize it into the individual aspect, in which you're taking multiple parts of something and putting it down to basically a single expression, right?
Well, I think what you're saying is just not only do you multiply in quantity and the productivity, you also improve in efficiency, right? I think that's
Right.
what you're getting at one-on-one, where one person operating in its solo is much more efficient because you can have one mind, one body, right? As opposed to multiple mind, multiple body. And I think that's where the power of family coming together, especially when you have, 150 people in one family and 340 people in other family. When that come together, it's a much more powerful force if those families are united in their own. And I think keeping a family united in that way is actually a very powerful thing. It's something that I aspire to do, is grow my family in a, not necessarily a power sense, but the idea of prosperity sense. I think that is a beautiful thing. And I think everybody can be family, not limited to last name, not limited to bloodline as well.
So how do you think most people see marriage nowadays?
I've actually, I got married last year, and I've talked a lot to many, many of my friends about marriage, including the ones that have gotten married and including the ones that haven't gotten married. Marriage, I can tell based on my understanding, reading, and research, has evolved tremendously over the years, and nowadays, marriage is, obviously, it's something that I think people like to get to because it's standard practice. At a certain age, people like to get married, and it's a formality that women kind of anticipate it if this guy is serious about you and it wants for you to be in the long run. So it's an institution that provides a lot of structure to the nuclear family, and at the same time, I know a lot of younger folks don't want to get married because they don't see the purpose of having kids, and they like the flexibility of having the freedom of multiple partners, because marriage is a very inhibiting thing, if you will, if that's not what you're into. But if you're into a way of stability, I think marriage is a good way to go when you find a good partner. But I think for people that don't like this stability or whatever, that they want more spontaneity, they want more freedom, I think it's not for them. And also, I think it's only in 1967 with the case of Loving versus Virginia where we legalize in America interracial marriage. I'm sure interracial relationship was practiced well before that, but in terms of interracial marriage, it was legalized from that case. So over the years, from purely power, survival, and wealth transfer, now marriage as an institution and as a structure to our society has evolved and expanded on, like you said, to accept interracial marriages, to accept LGBT relationships. I think now it's legal in over 36 countries, and yeah. So I think it's always gonna evolve, and I think last episode we touched upon the development of AI and technology, and I think marriage will continue to evolve, and 100 years from now, maybe we'll even see legalizing of AI relationship with humans. Who knows? What do you think?
That's a crazy concept, but I think that it's definitely in the works, because we're seeing this AI being utilized in relationships, to a certain extent. Like, we are only in the training wheels of it, but as time goes on, you get better and better at something the more you practice it, right? So I think in the same way, the AI relationships are going to become more integrated with the human culture, and there's going to be those outliers at first that want to be in a official relationship with their AI counterpart, and they'll lock it down in a marriage. And like you said, marriage is kind of restricting to a certain extent, but at the same time, it actually opens up for a certain type of expression, and that expression is structuralized in a way where you could take references from other people's marriages and basically put it on your own marriage. And just like in any other relationship, but because you're married and you have the title of marriage, now you can do it with marriages, right? So if you see another family expressing themselves in a certain way, you want to emulate it because you see them happy. Now you can do that in a way that is safe, and basically, like, it feels right that you are under this title of marriage, and now you can like express yourself in the same way. And basically there's like this uniformity concept in it that allows for a safe space expression in which you are like more free. And I guess I'm trying to get to the point where, like, having the same title as another person, you guys are entering a certain culture in which you guys are sharing the same kind of concepts, and basically like there's
It's like a
an
sacred
acceptance in
bond,
it.
right? It's like a sacred bond, a special relationship that both is acknowledging that they're a team, almost.
Yep.
What you're talking about actually is very cool, because this is the ideal concept of marriage, right? Where two people come together and we multiply. And so far, we've emphasized only on the ideals of marriage and what it can provide. On the contrary opposite, now you can see that divorce rate is actually through the roof, as opposed to 1960s and 70s, where over 72% of the adults in America are getting married. Now only 50%. That's a 20% decrease over the last 50 years. And divorce rate is at about 40 to 50% as well. So more people are getting divorced, because now actually women has the ability to say no to marriage, and also, I guess, the freedom, right, that it comes with.
Yeah, we used to have like the concepts as children that marriage was something that is necessary for basic development, because like your parents, they were married to a certain extent, or most of our parents were married when they were raising us. So in our minds, we believed that we had to get in the same situation in order to like be functional adults, right? And nowadays I guess we've awakened to the fact that we don't necessarily need to get in the same relationship status in order to basically function. There are still aspects of it that hold true when you're in a marriage. You know, there's like things that bind you together, and that connection of being bound together in a way makes the relationship stronger, right? So different aspects of marriage will strengthen the relationship in ways that
100%.
not being married will not.
Yes, 100%. A healthy, strong marriage will grow both individual exponentially, I think. But in a very toxic relationship, it will kill both individual in it. And interesting point is you talked about the sacred union almost. When I say sacred union, which is the optimal version of marriage, and I think what you're emphasizing on is exactly that. And to add on and exemplify, the decline of marriage rate over the last 50 years, I think, ties a lot to the liberation of sex and love and the hookup culture. Previously, sex in a conservative way is gated by marriage, and for men to get to that, access of sex in abundance, it comes with the responsibility of marriage. But because of the liberation of sex and the hookup culture, and it's the explosion of a hookup culture, now for men and women both to access sex is no longer gated by this the institution structure. So I think that's another why there's a big decline of marriage. And if you're ever interested in our discussion in the hookup culture, click on the link over here where a previous episode we talked about hookup culture and how it impacts our society.
I think one thing about marriage is that it requires the husband and wife to be on the same page. Once they're not on the same page, the title of marriage kind of holds together like glue the relationship. But as time goes on, if the husband and wife, they don't keep working on their problems together, then essentially one of the two is going to want a divorce. And
yes,
as soon as one of the two wants a divorce, you can't necessarily go back on that. As soon as that thought triggers in the mind where I don't want to be with this person anymore, you can't necessarily go back on that. You have to maintain this status quo of being together in a way that togetherness is benefiting both of your lives. And if you don't, then basically it's going to be a lapse in the relationship, in which the marriage is going to fall apart. And you don't want a marriage to be supporting the idea that you're only together for your kids, because what you're going to do is you're going to inspire your kids that marriage is not something that necessarily works in a way that is productive. Because if you're not working together and you have fights and stuff like that, then in your kid's mind, it's going to build the pattern recognition that people that are married are people that fight. So they're not going to want to get married to a certain extent until they find this person that can meet all their needs and meet those needs that are necessary for the marriage to go well. And basically, if that husband and wife aren't necessarily on the same page, then it's going to be more destructive than constructive for the kids that are involved in the family.
Oh, for sure, yeah. Kids are so malleable when they're young, right? So whatever they observe, they would think is normal. And that's where a lot of traumas in every generation comes from, is when they come from a perhaps dysfunctional family. Yeah. And that's a very sad reality in a lot of cases.
In ways, the dysfunctional family makes stronger people out of it,
For sure.
or weaker people out of it.
For sure.
I think it can go either way depending on the outlook of the individual involved.
Mm.
If the individual involved has a positive outlook on life,
Mm-hmm.
then they're going to try to construct a reality in which the marriage is actually that dysfunctional marriage is actually something that is benefiting them in ways that they learn lessons that will not work out for them. So they basically have to operate in a fashion that is different from how their parents originally did, and that is like inspirational in the fact that you are going to be more efficient in the ways that you express yourself.
Yeah. The concluding thought I wanted to bring to us is, so based on what we discussed today, I think based on my personal experience, if for anyone out there that wants to try the concept of marriage and eventually think about finding someone that may eventually want to get married, my 3 advice for everybody is know yourself and who you want to be. I think that's fundamentally important as a strong, independent man. And my only advice is for men out here for now: know yourself and work towards that. Second, find someone that you love. And I know it's a lot easier to be loved, but it's a lot harder to be the lover, to provide love. So as a father and the foundation of a family, I need to be the key provider. And that means I need a strong support system, which is why I have my brother Eric, which is why I have other friends, that when the times get hard, I have a strong support system from my family that will help me through. And then find someone that loves you and has the similar vision as you, both in lifestyle, both in vision for the future, for a family structure, someone that can work beside you through the hard times. I think that's my only advice to everybody that wants to get married, because life is hard, marriage is hard, everything is hard. Choose your heart, but if you're gonna do this hard, find a way that you enjoy it. What about you? What would you say if you still want to explore the marriage concept, or do you think that is something you would not want to do? And if you may or may not want to do it, how do you think you will go about it, Eric?
Wow. I think I would make my own like conceptualization of marriage, and maybe not go about it the traditional way. I think like
just
going
like that
through the
piece of
traditional-
paper, just like that piece
Yeah,
of paper don't mean much. It's about the bond. That's the same thing I told my wife long before. Is, to me, the signature of a certificate means nothing if the people in it is not for it, right?
Yeah, I would
Go
have to
ahead,
have
finish
a
it.
very strong. I would have to have a very strong relationship, and it would have to like come about naturally. Like the idea of marriage would have to like be something almost like as if we invented it ourselves. Like how would we go about this concept, and how would we want to express ourselves in this relationship moving forward in a new light? Because as you switch titles in which you give your last name to each other, or you know, the man gives the last name to the woman, you know, basically you are symbolizing that you are now part of the same family tree, and family has a certain closer bond than friends do, in a way in which you are now claiming that this person that did not share your same blood now is part of the same bloodline, in a way.
Wow, that's
So-
a very powerful way of describing it. Yes.
So your bond is going to go to another level, right? So if you're not ready to take it to another level in all aspects, then I would say don't get into that field of marriage, you know.
So the contradicting is I'm practiced exactly that. I actually rushed into marriage a little bit and holding strong, but we do have our conflicts. So we'll see where it goes from here. I guess for all of us, life is just like marriage is one of the biggest experiment of humanity, isn't it?
Like I said earlier about marriage, and you know, take it as something that is your training wheels for building a bicycle, in which you eventually have to balance in ways that are going to involve your creativity and your personal expression, right? So you're gonna have problems that arise in which you're gonna have to become creative to solve them. And if you are not employing your creativity, then to a certain extent the relationship's gonna dry out, and it's not going to have the aspect of why you're together anymore. And you know, you want to maintain that reason of, this is why I'm with this person, and you know, we're gaining out of this relationship together in every way and facet that applies to taking care of oneself. And you know, in taking care of oneself, in taking care of each other, you know, you're going to improve in ways that are outside of the traditional only personal responsibilities that happen, right? So taking it to the next level in a marriage means that you're vowing on a deeper level to accomplish certain aspects of life that are integral in ways that you can't not necessarily separate yourself from. So in these deeper rooted expressions, essentially, like, it almost propels you forward in ways that not being in a marriage cannot do.
I see.
So for me, like, if I wanted to get into a marriage, it would have to be like, because I maxed out myself and my relationship in ways that I can't necessarily do more in, and the only next step forward would be marriage. It would be like almost like this last resort of, in a sense, because I love this person so much that I would want to take it to the next level, and there's no way in my mind where there would be another way to do so. So it would be like this last resort kind of thing, and that's like super weird to think about to me at this moment, because I'm not necessarily in a relationship. I haven't been in a relationship for, you know, over 5 years. So to
You're a
me,
monk,
it's
that's
like
why.
yeah, like, to me, like, being single has like taught me how to take care of myself in ways that, like, I haven't been able to imagine then like while being in a relationship, like being in a relationship takes a certain mental bandwidth in which you are allocating a certain amount of RAM to this other person, and in doing so is beneficial because you can reflect the same way you're taking care of this person onto yourself. But at the same time, like, you can't be as resourceful when you're not just taking care of one entity, basically. That's at least how I think about it.
Well, I'm sure a lot of people resonate with that. We're also different, and the way we perceive the world and experience the world is also very different. So, as we know that for a long time we met each other, we know we're very different, right? You're very inwardly facing, and I'm very outwardly facing, and perhaps that's what makes us such good friends, is because of the polarity, right? And I think in relationship, even marriage, is a lot of times, so that's what they say, opposites attract in marriages, and sometimes similarity also could simulate as well. So I think it really depends on the individual, and what works for me might not work for other people, and what works for other people might not work for you. So I think the key concept is knowing oneself, and the only way we get to know ourselves is really face the harsh reality of who we really are sometimes. And we all have limitations. We all are not perfect, but I think we all deserving of love and can be an overall positive force for the world, each and individual one of us.
That's another thing about marriage is like you're setting this precedent of an eternal bond together, in which this shift is now going to mean that the two of you are one now, and this oneness together means that moving forward, everything that you do is with this other person in mind, and taking that responsibility on is going to increase, I think, the overall bandwidth that you have to express yourself as a human being.
But don't you see that the reality in the modern society now, the way marriage is practiced, is the complete opposite of what you're saying. Now is not about a marriage that lasts a lifetime, but almost about how long this marriage will last. Look how many times all the most popular figureheads have divorced, right?
Yeah,
look
I
at
think
Jeff
that's
Bezos,
because
look
they're
at
not.
Elon Musk, look at Bill Gates even, and you have the women's as well. Lauren Sanchez, she's probably slept her way up to be the wife of Jeff Bezos. I think she's married 3 times. There's so many examples of now divorce is easily just like a breakup. So what do you think about that?
I think the idealistic nature of marriage has been skewed to the point where people don't necessarily honor it to the same level, and this goes into so many aspects of life where we are no longer honoring our moral upkeeping our moral characteristics anymore, and like to a certain extent that's individualized because like it varies from individual to individual, right? The level of honor and basically the level of honor that one has for themselves is reflective in the way that they carry themselves. So if a person has a high level of honor, then it's more likely that they will not get divorced, because honor that initial vow that they made, and they will do everything in their power throughout the marriage in order to make sure that that marriage is not going to break in the first place, right? So I think it varies from individual to individual, but if the basically like what happens is if the incentive is high enough for the person to break this initial vow, then they will break the vow, and that is basically like in a way tarnishing the honor that that person has in the first place.
It comes with honor.
Yeah, so going forward after a divorce, like you're almost like diminishing your moral capabilities to a certain extent. So like,
what if those people were in a toxic relationship or toxic marriage, and maybe it's better for them to not be with each other?
Then they were not honorable individuals in the first place because they did not honor their own aspects of their own minds. Because if they got in a relationship that was disingenuous to the point where it was toxic, then basically they were not respecting the characteristics of their own mental faculties that said that this was a good thing moving forward, right?
So meaning either they didn't think it through, or they don't know themselves enough at the time. Or do you think it's possible that people evolve and people change over time, that perhaps their, what they thought was right no longer is the right fit?
Well, in that case, I think the activity of the marriage wasn't grounded enough. The interactions that the people had together, it wasn't often enough to the point where they could control these factors. And I think like if you can't control these factors and you can't communicate often enough in honest expressions, then you're going to skew the outcome of the marriage in a way that cannot necessarily be recovered. So you have to be extremely like in center with yourself in order to see if the person is lying through their words.
Yes.
And if the person is like, if you're unable to pick up on these things, then it means that you yourself are not aligned to the point where you can sense the vibrations that tell you that someone else is lying. So basically it means that you yourself aren't aligned in a way that would be conducive to a relationship as an individual. So that the part you play in the relationship is not going to be like, it's not going to be necessarily, how do you say this? It's not going to be necessarily playing a role correctly in the interactions if you yourself are not centered within yourself, right? Give me 1 second. I gotta go make sure my solar panel didn't blow away.
Okay. I think this about wraps it up for us today, though. Did your solar panel survive the wind?
It blew away a little bit, but it was held by the cord.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah.
It was still generating though?
Yeah.
Nice.
Pretty awesome episode today. Some of the shit I didn't know what I was talking about, definitely, so I got to work on that. But I'll just cut it out as best as I can.
Yeah, no worries.
You were speaking a lot of the time, so thanks for carrying us today.
No, bro, we are in this together. What I think is, this is something that is new and dear to me, so I I'm able to speak on it a little bit, and your contribution has a lot of weight to it too. I think you have a lot of great concepts. Um, yeah, I think just maybe succinct a bit, because I do start paying. I'm listening, and then, but then also because it was breaking up a little bit, so I was having a little bit of difficulty following. But I didn't want to interrupt because I know you're recording on the other side, and it was not breaking up. So
Yep. Good on you.
yeah, this episode was a lot of fun, and I don't know, maybe you can stop the recording now. I think I'm gonna stop it.